Hi everyone, how's it going? This is Daniel Kurkowski with the VSM Real Estate Podcast. This week I'm joined by Goran Vazovic.
How's it going, everybody?
And today we have a special guest. We have Ryan Burke from BleuAnt Designs. How's it going, Ryan?
Great. Thanks, guys, for having me in here.
Yes, welcome to the podcast, the VSM Podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like I have made it to the next level now.
No question.
We paid him to say that.
So anyway, we really initially captured our interest, I think, is one of the projects that you're currently working on right now in St. Paul. Obviously, we're a St. Paul company and like to stay as much on the pulse as we can. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and BleuAnt Design?
Yeah, we've got a 6-unit high-end condo building we're doing on Grand Avenue, just off Lexington. And it's a really unique situation where we got into it as partners with BleuAnt, Kyle Lenzen and myself, where we were taking homes, remodeling them, fixing them up, making them a better home without actually demo. And we came across the house here on Grand Avenue, and it wasn't going to make it. It wasn't anything to work with whatsoever. And we asked ourselves, well, what could we put here?
Right.
And we ventured out, talked with the city, talked with the neighborhood committees, and we came up with this idea to make it work. And we're 24 to 26 months into this deal, but we're just getting out of the ground now. So there's an end in sight where we're hoping to see our accomplishments very soon.
24, 26 months. I wonder what possibly could be slowing that process down. Are there some difficulties provided by what you're trying to do right now?
There is a lot of difficulties. We like to look at them as challenges and growing opportunities.
Yep.
When you take on a large project like this, as far as our scope of work goes, you have a lot to learn about. You got a lot of people to meet. And in this situation, being it's on a historic street like Grand Avenue, we wanted to make sure we developed a product that fit Grand Avenue for just the aesthetics of the people already living there, but then for buyers coming in. In order to do that, you had to work with the Summit Hill Association, the immediate neighbors in the area. Everybody has their own opinions and thoughts of what you should or shouldn't do there. So it was a lot of exploring through that, a lot of working with the city and the zoning and the planning departments. And we just really spent a lot of time, about 18 months, going back and forth and trying to find something that would satisfy everybody's wants and desires as much as possible. You're never going to make everybody completely happy.
Never, yeah. As any politician can tell you.
Yeah, but you want to try, and you want to do it the right way. And we're from St. Paul. We've lived in the area. We've done a lot of the projects in the area. And so we have a lot of pride with Grand Avenue and St. Paul in general. Yeah. And we wanted to make sure we showed that with our product.
That's great here.
Yeah, and you understand St. Paul definitely has a unique aesthetic to it and a unique way of going about and doing things. The building that you acquired, I'm assuming there was a building there that you tore down?
There was a small house, a very old small house, and as much as I had been up and down Grand Avenue, I never really noticed that one house. It's in between 4 large apartment buildings.
Okay.
And I think your eye just sees those, so unless you're really looking, you missed it. But the people who live in the immediate area would come to me and say, "Oh, you guys bought that cat house." Apparently they had a fake cat in this window for literally decades.
Oh, I thought it was a different cat house you were talking about.
So yeah, they don't have those on Grand anymore. But,
No.
But this particular one, it was in terrible shape. It was small. It had some historical value because it was so old.
Right.
But it had been added on to so many times and so much construction done poorly, and literally over 100 years that when we worked with the Historical Society, they just said there was no value to keeping that thing, and it was fairly contaminated between the lead and all the asbestos everywhere. So it was just not an opportunity to keep anything about it.
Surprising to hear that they let one go. That's usually not the case for
it's not,
buildings.
no, but when it's in this bad a shape,
right,
there's really nothing you could do with it.
What a great find, again, on Grand Avenue. Did you have any inside info, or was it listed on MLS? How did you come to acquire it, knowing that, a lot of people that have, money and capabilities that didn't beat you to it?
Well, and it had been on the market for a long time, dropped in price a few times, and it got to the point where without thinking of it as a condo building, but as a home that we could make better and remodel. It got to that price point for us where we looked at it. And then when we looked at it, we thought of it from a different angle of, well, what if we removed the home and we did something else here? What would be the best use? And we started asking ourselves, well, how did it last this long? Why haven't other people had these ideas? And I talked to a lot of developers that we know. We talked to some of the people in the city. And I think that's the uniqueness that Kyle and I and BleuAnt as a company bring together on the table, is that we are thinking outside the box. We're not specialized in one area, where we'll look at an opportunity and what can we do with it in its best use. Some people just want to flip homes. Some people just want to tear them down and build new. Some people want to do only retail. And we just wanted to look at it as an overall picture. And then the second one is the first question you asked, how's it taken over 24 months, is just the neighborhood it's in and the city it's on. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of people who are involved, which makes it a great area, but it also takes a lot of time. And we were willing to bite that off and learn from it and put a big stamp on our name.
So to bring it back, one day you just woke up, you're like, hey, I think I'm going to go develop a building on Grand Avenue. Can you give our listeners and ourselves a little bit of background to how you got in real estate, some of how you and your business partner met, and what led up to the point where you said, hey, I'm going to take this multi-million-dollar construction project on Grand Avenue?
Yeah, it's a long story. So I've been in real estate for about 20 years, literally since college. And we were a junior in college, and we lived in a home with about 11 people we were renting. And it didn't take long for me to collect the checks and say to myself, this seems like a lot of money for a home like this.
Right.
What's it cost to own? So did a little research and found out we were probably paying 4 times what any mortgage would be on the home. And being a math guy, I was like, well, hey, there's an opportunity here.
Right. That was your aha moment.
That was it. Like, this is crazy. And of course, not knowing anything about real estate back then, went into the agent's office that owned the property, and it was this guy, a small town guy named Clint Blazer. That
hey, we know Clint.
Yeah.
At the time, I didn't know how much I'd hit the jackpot to be renting from a legend like himself. And
shout out to Clint.
Yeah,
we'll definitely tag him in this podcast.
So he honestly did kick around some of the ideas with me and told me kind of where he had been, and it made a lot of sense. So that next year, I bought a duplex. We found an assumable mortgage. It's still in college, lots of debt, not a great job yet. So we had to make what we could do, and I lived in one side, rented to 3 friends, and had 4 people on the other side, and that kind of started the bubble in real estate. Got my license after that, and started investing in other properties. So we bought single-family homes that we would turn
you and
around.
your business partner?
At that time, me and my wife.
Okay.
And girlfriend and myself. Okay. But we bought some properties.
What year was this? 97?
This would have been in the 97, 98. Okay. And we bought lake cabins, ski condos, single family, like I said, the duplex. And we just started fixing them up and renting them, using some of them at some point. And that led me into, once I was finished with college and kind of ready to make a monthly paycheck versus...
get in the real world.
Yeah, get in the real world. I got into property management and leasing. Okay. So I worked with a large company for several years there and got some experience. And it was really great to work with a guy. His name is Rick Plessner. He's another local St. Paul guy.
What company, if you don't mind?
It was Inland Commercial out of Chicago.
Okay.
And he was a great mentor, and got to the point where he's like, you've learned what you can in the property management world working with me right here in St. Paul. You should explore. And so I went exploring and found another job and led to another one. Yeah. And now I'm in property management still full time. And my college friend, Kyle Lenzen, our current wives, were back then roommates together. So we got to know each other, and he'd been doing some residential homes that he'd been fixing up and turning as well. And we just said, why aren't we doing this together? And it's kind of brought us into forming a BleuAnt, where we're working as a partnership. And we have full-time jobs. We still have full-time jobs outside of BleuAnt, so it's a big challenge of balancing those things, working lots of nights and evenings with BleuAnt, and then keeping a family life and keeping yourself calm by doing things you enjoy as well.
Right. So, and is your full-time job still in the real estate field?
Yep, still in real estate. I do property management, some leasing, renewal leasings. We do some construction management too.
Nice. Yeah, I can see how that would help out when your day job's preparing you for what you're doing right now. Yeah,
it does. And
so, as you were going through your story in the beginning, especially after college, and we stressed this so many times that you really just have to be okay with doing a lot, having a regular job, quote unquote, plus focusing on finding deals. And in this stage, you're managing construction projects, getting necessary permits, communicating with the city. I mean, that in itself is a full-time job. But you have that and a full-time job plus a family. How do you manage to work that within your daily schedule when someone could just say, well, I just don't have the time. This is why I'm in this job that I don't like or whatnot.
Yeah, well, I've tried to find that genie in the bottle, and it hasn't happened yet. So, yeah, you're forced to do a lot. And one of the things that Kyle and I have learned is that it takes a team. And, a lot of people say, oh, it takes a village to raise a family. Well, it takes a team to run a business. And, as I mentioned, I have a full-time job that I'm committed to first. And as well as Kyle. So what we had to do is surround ourselves with people who could help us on the BleuAnt side. Mm-hmm. And we have some great real estate agents, Sarah Yoakum and Jody Klepek with Yoakum Real Estate. We found some good architects. My wife, Sarah, has been doing a lot of the design work, aesthetics, and helping with the layout. And the biggest factor in this one was my wife's brother-in-law. They own a company, Winberg Construction. They're out of Michigan, but he's done deals this size and scope on the condo and residential as well as commercial all around the United States and many different locations where he's been able to manage from afar. So his company is our day-to-day on-site eyes and ears of the project. And where I'm coming in is going to the city council meetings in the evenings, talking to neighbors in the evenings, spending weekends, like you said, where are you going to find these deals, checking out the projects. Mm-hmm. And that same teamwork mentality comes back to the family side. I couldn't be doing this without my wife, Sarah. Kyle couldn't be doing it without his wife, Sarah, either. So they're a big part in keeping the family in check, keeping ourselves in check with it. So it's a teamwork thing on both sides. And it's the only way to make that work and be successful.
Right. Yeah. I think tapping into, people closest to you to build that, dream team or someone that's going to be your support system. Yeah. Especially in such a big endeavor. So I had a question regarding, after you were, after college, you did flips. And did you do buy and holds and flips or?
Yes, a little bit of both. We did some of the vacation rental property. We would use it ourselves, and then we would be renting it out when we weren't there.
So were you actively managing that yourself?
Yep.
Through your background a little bit?
Yep, through the background and everything else. You learn real quick when you own something. And going back to our local favorite, Clint Blazer here, the one thing 20-some years ago, he said, the only way you're going to make this work is if you do the front-end work the hardest and you really look at who you're going to rent to. You get good renters in there, a lot of headaches go away, it takes a lot less time. And so I have followed that advice since then, and anytime you look at holding a vacation property or a home or a duplex and you rent it, you do as much work up front and you really vet those people who are coming in, and that's the easiest way to get through everything. Even if you're not making the same amount of money, you got to outweigh the headaches.
I know we, from our property or third-party property management side, in our business, VSM, we preach the same thing, even when we're engaging with customers and clients, how important and paramount of a decision it is to get that right tenant, and why absolutely. You should wait until that right tenant comes along, because it's going to save everybody time, money, headaches, and it's going to make it a better, more positive real estate experience, and it's going to encourage people to get into it more and buy more, which is obviously going to benefit our business as well. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're lucky in St. Paul. there's rental properties always had demand for renters, and
Yep.
there's a lot of great colleges in the area, and they have a lot of high reputations of these colleges. So I think for the most part, a lot of the students in the St. Paul area are much more well behaved maybe than in other parts of larger cities. So we're really fortunate.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and not something we really talked about or on topic, but while you're here, I might as well pick your brain a little bit. But I don't know if you saw, but Minneapolis recently just passed some new legislation where they're raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
Incredible, yeah.
Which is crazy and a little bit strange, but at the same time, to me, and I don't know if you've thought about it at all, but to me it seems like that's actually going to kind of strengthen the renter class in the area a little bit as well. So, there are definitely drawbacks anytime you have any sort of imposed financial situation. You're creating a deadweight loss, and,
you are.
There's an inefficiency. But
the thing I see about how that can affect the real estate world, and you hit it on the head, is a lot of people who are at the minimum wage jobs are renters.
Right.
And they kind of go hand in hand. So with that, with people making better money now and still renting, that gives landlords the opportunity to raise prices, and not in a necessary spot to gouge tenants, but they're going to be able to raise their rents a little bit and better the property at the same time. Use those additional incomes to make it a better property.
Right.
Better properties make a better community makes a greater city.
Yeah, no question. One thing to be careful of, though, and I'm a little wary because I've seen the progression that Minneapolis has taken, which kudos for building this in St. Paul.
Yeah.
is if there is a rent control component that comes into play, that'll definitely be an unfortunate.
Yeah, now that you mentioned the whole Minneapolis or Hennepin County, what they were making the changes, especially with the minimum wage, but also when it comes to renting and the subsidized rent, how one will affect the other, and what that means to be a landlord in Minneapolis or whatnot versus here. And we've had some mayoral candidates come here and discuss that and got their 2 cents. I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are in it, because you're in our world looking at this.
Yeah, it's going a little closer to the political world that I try to stay away from.
Yeah.
On the economic side, it's there's a spot where it helps for the government to be involved and control the minimum wages, control your rent structures, or even your taxes and how that affects everything else. But at some point, you have to let the economy and the cause and effects work itself out and try to find that balance.
Yeah.
And I think the one benefit, though, where the minimum wage helps not on the rental side, but if you've got 100 properties, 100 units to rent, and you've got 150 people who want to rent, and now maybe 75 of those people are on minimum wage, and they got a higher wage increase now, and they're able to afford another apartment or a bigger apartment, the other people are affected by this as well. They're making a little bit more money. And again, I don't know the economics behind it all, but it trickles up in that sense. Mm-hmm. And these people make more money. They're renting better places. They're going to better restaurants. They're buying better clothes. Those workers are making more money. And the way that affects the development side or the residential home side is that now those people who were kind of in the more expensive rental cap, they're moving out to buy a home because now those rents are getting closer to a mortgage payment. So why not own? And now that increases your single family opportunities as a developer and as a in the commercial world too, with all the way down with the retail. So
it's a very good point. So I'm glad I asked you that question. So going back into this building in particular, I'd really like to dive into it and kind of get all the
nuts and bolts, the size, the square footage, everything.
Exactly, because it's such an interesting and you don't hear about this type of opportunity presenting itself very often, where you're working with the city that intensely on a site that was a historic site. And I mean, 24 months seems like a crazy amount of time because, just speaking with you, if you came in and you're like, hey, I want to build this building and I want to do it in a way that everyone's going to be happy with and make sense. Yeah. Be like, great. Let's next week figure this out. We'll call a meeting and you know what I mean? Exactly. So when you initially pitched this idea, what were the first obstacles that you sort of had to overcome?
Number one obstacle was parking. Being it's on Grand Avenue, it's always a problem, an issue. Everyone who lives up and down Grand, I'm sure most people who live in St. Paul are aware that they wanted to put the parking meters in. And luckily that fell through. But without recalling the math directly, but it was like $125 to $140 a month for someone who rented an apartment to park on their own street and plug a meter. God forbid you had a night job and you had to be there all day long while you're parked and sleeping during the day. It was just, It was ridiculous. And there's not a lot of parking on the side streets either. Summit Avenue is only a block away, and it's got the boulevard. And so that was what the city came to us and said, whatever you do, you got to supply off-street parking. We've got to make that happen. And that was kind of our first step into exploring all this. So to make that work, the first challenge was, how do we get off-site parking but still get a building? We're only a third of an acre. So it's not not like the CVS production where you got a half a block to work with and you can have some surface parking and some underground. So the only way to make that feasible to get enough parking is to have the underground parking. And in order to get that, you have to have a stall that's a certain length to park in. And then you need a drive lane to get to those stalls that have to be a certain width. You put that together, you add in a foundation, and you have your net width of your building. Well, that ended up being larger than what was allowed for the size of a lot. And so you need a variance for that. Then we needed to increase the size from front to back for that ramp because it would be too steep to go down into it. So that now we have another variance for the north and the south from the city from the street back to the alley. So we have those two variances, and when you combine those together, you get a third issue with your footprint. So now the stamp of your building is larger, and trying to walk through that with the neighbors and the Summit Hill Association, the members, was a real big challenge. In their mind, as developers, we just want to build the biggest building possible. We want all these variances, and we want to make a ton of money. But that wasn't the case.
Right.
The case was we had to satisfy the parking. And to get to that, we had to go this way. And there would have been other buildings and other opportunities to put there with less parking. But then the city doesn't want to do that because they want the tax revenue. They want something that says Grand Avenue, not a small building. As you can see up and down Grand Avenue, they're redoing the Lexington. They've added, their apartments. They're, redoing this and that. All the way down on Snelling, they're getting to do the same thing where you want a larger building that brings in the density. It helps bring in the tax revenue. And going back to the minimum wage comment, how can we increase the city and make it a better neighborhood? And this is how you do it. And not everybody likes that idea, and not everyone was on board with it. So we had some people who just weren't on the same page with us or the city, and that came into the next of the challenges.
Yeah, so can you give us, obviously there was some opposition, and to me kind of doesn't make sense because you said you're trying to make the neighborhood a better place, and there's an actual quantifiable way to do that, and it's by contributing via tax revenue. And if the people that are going to be owner occupants, they're going to want to park somewhere. So naturally, those variances are not just for your benefit. It's for their benefit, who are going to be there. They're going to be walking the streets. They're going to be taking care of the neighborhood. So I just don't understand what the argument was that they had that was opposed to what you were trying to do.
I think the best way I can relate to it is a piece of art. You and I might think this thing is crazy, ugly. Who would pay money for it? But then there's a guy down the hall who's going to pay $1 million for that piece of art. It all looks different to someone. Some people thought it was too tall. Some people thought it was too wide. Some thought that the brick we're using and matching with the buildings looked too modern. So everyone has their own different idea.
Right.
And when we started this, like I said, we went to the city first and kind of said, what do you want to see on this site? So when we pitched it to the neighbors and the neighborhood committee, we only had a partial product because we wanted to work with everybody to get to the end product and try to make this a community development. Obviously, not everyone's going to be satisfied, as like we said, so we really tried tried to minimize where we would place windows to help neighboring homes and buildings have as much privacy as they can. We shrunk patios and decks so that it couldn't be used as a large party to help, again, with the noise and stuff. So we tried to take a lot of that into consideration, and our product evolved and changed over the 18 months that we were working on it.
So was that part of your negotiation, is really to say, hey, we're planning on building this, however, we know we're going to come, there's going to be some opposition. That's why we want to work with you and move things around. Or did you have some strong opposition after the fact, after you have all the plans?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So, we got our variances, and they weren't necessarily contingent on anything. They were just granted to us. But we don't want to turn around and change our entire building and then upset people. It'll change a little bit as the units sell and the buyers come in. They want to switch something here or there, which they have the right to do, which is out of our control once we've sold a unit. But the height, a lot of people were afraid of the height. And without getting a variance, the code was we could go 40 feet. Right now we're at 37 feet 4 inches, and that 3 foot difference is, well, people are like, well, just do it, go to 40 feet. Well, we're trying to be respectful with the neighbors who thought the building was too big. And technically, can I go to 40 feet? Yes. But we're about 3 feet wider, and one of my sons says to me before one of our meetings with the city council, is like, I don't understand why the people are so angry. And I said, well,
I think that every time I'm at a city planning meeting.
He's like, but this looks so great, it's so nice, it's good, and he understood it, and I explained to him, I said, well, we have to be 3 feet larger, wider than it is allowed. And he said, well, you're 3 feet shorter, though. Isn't that kind of the same thing? And I had never stepped back far enough away to even put that through in my head. And I said, yeah, it is almost a wash. And we didn't intend to actually have 3 feet below the height limit. Our intention was to keep it as low as possible, and it happened to be a near wash. And I think that for our company's identity moving forward, people are going to recognize that, yeah, they didn't go to 40 feet. They got their variances. They could still have gone to 40 feet, but the height was a concern. So we found a way to make it work without taking advantage of the whole 40 feet.
Yeah. You mentioned, so you're talking to the city, working on getting your variances, and at the same time, it was the Summit
Hill Association.
The Summit Hill Association, which is that private citizens?
That's the private citizens in the neighborhood. It's kind of the neighborhood council.
Okay.
And there's quite a few of them in the city of St. Paul. They all work independently, but they all come together and with their city council members. So
really their influence is they're just a unified group of citizens who lobbies essentially to their council person and any other person who may be in some sort of authority there.
Absolutely, yeah. And for a lot of people, they see it as a huge headache and a challenge to deal with the neighborhood council people and some of the neighbors. But again, I think we came away with a much better product dealing with those individuals and those groups to come up at the end. And we made a lot of changes to this thing that, looking back, I'm like, gosh, I didn't like that first run around at all.
Right.
And it got us to where we were. So working with them from the beginning, albeit it took us time, I think we've got a much better product and design than we probably would have had without the input, positive or negative, from those groups.
In sort of a weird way, too, do you feel like there's maybe some value in their input beyond just development and making it right for the city? But, I mean, this is a group of people who are very concerned about what's happening in the neighborhood and probably somewhat well-connected, somewhat influencers. And now you have this building that they kind of had a hand in designing, and guess what? There's going to be 6 units ready to sell. They may know some people and help with that as well. Yeah,
absolutely. They may know people, and again, working with them as much as we can. They're talking to the city council as well. And like you said, they're kind of petitioning and rallying the troops, whether they're for something or against something. Grand Old Day is an example. They went to 2 days. It didn't work out for the immediate neighbors. They spoke up and went back to 1 day. And I think that not only do you make connections working with those people in those neighborhoods, but you're learning the city. And quite frankly, I don't want to own real estate in a neighborhood that could care less what I do to my property.
Right.
When that happens, it's just there's no rhyme or reason to it, and you're not going to have buyers in that type of neighborhood where everything's a free-for-all. So I greatly appreciated the people who support us, but I appreciated the people who were opposed, because they brought a lot of things to the table that we had to look at and change that we probably never would have without that input.
So is it specifically the city that you're waiting on now for your final approvals and everything to?
Yeah, so we got most of our groundwork done. We started early spring with the great weather we had. I think February was warmer than most of June, so we had that benefit. So we had our footings, our foundations done. We got the parking ramp done, the underground ramp done. We've done a lot of the waterproofing. We've got an elevator tower up. We're doing a lot of energy efficient stuff to this product, and one of the big things we're using is an ICF, insulated concrete forms. It's a type of construction that's new on the market, but it's got high insulation value. It's a greener product than using wood, lumber, and steel. You can make it here. You're not shipping it in, but the insulation value is amazing. And we initially introduced this to our project when we tried to make the foundation as narrow as possible when we had accompanied the underground parking. And we're using that, and we're going all the way up with it. And so we've had it engineered specifically for our building to support the 3-story building with it. And so that was a lot of work up front. So we got a permit for all that work, and we did that. On top of that, we're doing all our storm sewer on site. So we're not tapping into the city resources. We're doing it all on site. Another way we're trying to stay green. But all of that work we've got permitted for. And now the above ground work, we're waiting for that. We're on about week 12 right now, which gets frustrating, but our hands are kind of tied as we work through the city.
Does that insulation also help with noise reduction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a 2.5 inches of foam on the outside, and you have 4.5 inches of concrete in between. So you have the foam that can help with the low decibels, and then the concrete helping with the higher decibels. And so for the outside people, and then the demising walls, it's huge. It's a great product for that too.
Excellent. And for the person who's living there.
Yeah, and for the buyer, it's more expensive product, and but again, we're looking at a little higher priced units, and along with that, we've done other insulating factors between floors to help get rid of the noise reduction. Then we've also gone to the higher end windows. So when I called Xcel Energy in this project, we said, hey, we want to do a LEED type building. We're not going to LEED certify it. It's much too expensive for a building of this size, but we want to follow that structure. And so they gave us some examples of things you could do, and we called Xcel Energy. Said, here's the windows, here's what we're using for insulation. What kind of savings can our buyer realize, not just cost, but on the environmental side? And the guy we were speaking to, he goes, well, honestly, you're going to heat this thing with a candle. He was like, this thing is top notch. So it's going to be
great in the winter.
And in the summer. You're not going to get the sun beating in on you, and you're not going to have the winter
What type
cold.
of heat will you have forced air furnaces in each unit?
We'll have forced air heating and cooling. Every unit will have their own controls. Each unit's gonna function like its own standalone single-family home.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the units, the 6 that you mentioned, I know you probably don't have like a hard price, but what is the price range that you want to be in?
Our median price range, we're starting currently at $750,000 per unit. Now that varies on which floor you're on and what side you're on. It's been amazing. We originally looked at the pricing for the back side of the building to be a little lower, and we saw most people see that as less desirable. Boy, were we wrong. A lot of people really like the idea of living on Grand Avenue but not facing it. They don't mind being on the other side of the building and still living on Grand Avenue. So they feel like that's a little more private, but they can still be on Grand Avenue.
Now, will a potential buyer, would they be able to customize their unit or some of the finishes? To what degree will you have that as an option?
obviously with only 6 units, there's not much room for margin when you're trying to buy by quantity.
Yep.
You know, we've been working with All Inc., another local St. Paul company, and trying to work with them on the appliances and find out how can we get not only the high-end appliances, but the energy-efficient appliances that look good. So we're packaging all that together, and we're getting a price based on that. They're excited to be a part of the whole building as well because they want that presence on Grand Avenue. They want to have the people see it and tour it. So they've been great to work with. But if one unit came in and said, well, I want all these other refrigerator appliances and stuff, and now we got to go supplement it, it's a drastic change.
Right.
So we got to pick and choose where people are going to be able to make their own personal touch. And, you know, same thing with the cabinets. We're trying to put in locally built cabinets. You know, we're not trying to get lumber that's shipped from the East Coast and the West Coast. We're trying to keep that close. So, but we want to give them design so some of the layout can change in a unit. You know, obviously we're not going to be able to put toilets and sinks on a whole nother wall, but we can fluctuate and move them around. So there is some change, and the earlier they sell, the more input a buyer is going to have.
No question.
But we want to make sure that we protect the product and the units as a whole, and then also keep the budget in line as much as possible. We want to also have those people be able to personalize it.
Have you started pre-selling these yet?
We've listed the first floor for sale several weeks ago, and we've had some interest in that, but we are still mostly getting all the meetings we've had. We've had lots of meetings, a lot of interest. They all go back to the third floor. So a lot of people still want to be on the third floor, but this building is really cool with the underground parking. It's up on a hill on Grand Avenue. It's only about 3.5 feet tall, but when you're standing on the first floor and you're looking out, you're 2 feet above the cars on the road. So you're still on the first floor. It's essentially like feeling like you're on a second story.
Right.
And with the apartment buildings next to us is that same feeling. When you're on the first floor of those apartment buildings, you're kind of on the second story. So I think once we get this upper levels going and people can get in and see it, they're going to understand, oh my gosh, first floor, you're up.
That sounds like a cool vlog to me. I don't know.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. No. We're working on doing bringing some visuals to help your marketing and also bring some attention to the project. I was going to ask you regarding finishing the units in its entirety before they're pre-sold, or how is your financing structured as such where you'll be able to finish everything to have delivered a product without actually pre-selling any of them?
Well, it's a great question, and it kind of is the second part of what are we pricing these at. When we originally started this whole walk of development, the site, we were at 9 units. Mm-hmm. We went down to 8 units, and then we went down to 6 units. And with each step, the reason we were changing it is people who were moving out of single families and wanted a condo on Grand Avenue wanted more square footage. Well, the people who want more square footage, they have a different taste for what they want to buy. So the product has evolved into a higher end finishes. And with that, the price changes. So we're constantly working with the bank, and we're constantly working with models of how do we finish these in a way that they can sell at a price point they're going to still make people happy. You can go in and put all the greatest and best of everything and then think it's going to sell for $1.5 million. Well, if no one wants to pay $1.5 million for that size or in that location, it's not going to work.
Right.
So we're adjusting, and we work with the bank. We're working with Highland Bank, local St. Paul again, and they've been really great to work with. So right now, I think our plan, though, is to finish one unit as a model.
Yep.
When you're spending this kind of money, that's a lot of money for a home, and you really want to see it. And it's new construction. Like I said, the ICF is new to a lot of people, and they want to see, touch, and feel this product. So I think we'll finish that one, and then I believe they'll start to pre-sell, and we'll design them on paper as we go, and then finish them.
That's a good strategy. It's the same thing that we're pretty much, going to want to do with the development deal that we're looking at in Roseville, is where we're prepping the land, building a model home, and then, having everything else pre-sold. But you really definitely, it's really hard for most people to imagine what's going to be there. Even if you have all the pictures or 3D renderings, they actually want to go inside,
Absolutely.
touch things, feel it. Exactly.
It's just like buying clothes. You know, you can go, if you bought an Under Armour shirt once, you can buy a second one online because you know what size you're getting.
That's right.
But if you have a polo and you want to go get an Under Armour, and I wear an XL in this, and I'll order an XL, it's not always going to fit. Every product is a little different, and they all feel different, and you want to see that model.
Right. No, I think it's a good strategy, and if for a lot of our listeners that are, not huge, big time developers with unlimited amount of money, it's a really good way to finance a larger development project where you're not bearing kind of the expense of the project when it's finished, but you're actually paying as you go, and taking the loan as you're building the other units. So it's much more feasible than one would think, where you don't have to pay it all up front and then sell it when they're done.
I think that was the Trump Tower model as well.
Really?
Develop a few completely, flush them out, and then 50% finish the rest. And, people in that price range like to finish.
Now I thought I said politics weren't my thing. Now you go bringing up Trump again.
We're talking about Trump business.
He built some houses too.
Pre-2015.
Right.
Well, and what you say, Darren, is a great point because it limits the risks, like you said, but it limits the risk for the bank too. And we want to make long-lasting partnerships with not only Highland Bank, but whomever we work with in the future too. And the way you do that is show them confidence in your product, but show them that you know what you're doing and you're not shooting the moon. Banks don't want to shoot the moon.
No, they want to
play it safe. Yeah.
100%. Yes. No, I think it's a great strategy. And where, let's say a project is $5 million, all land done, getting a $5 million loan, and let's say you're doing it with, 25% down plus the carrying costs are they could be astronomical versus, let's say, $2 million, where that is a price with one model, which is what you want to do and get into. And it's going to be much easier to get to that finished product.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
Going back to the financing component, though, I have to imagine that there were some difficulties that arose when you have a 9-unit building and this plan to develop it. Yeah. And then 2 years later, at various stages, you're down to a 6-unit building, and there's still approvals that you're waiting for. You have all these holding costs in the meantime. So on the financing side and on your projection side, did you budget for that and account for some of the delays that you're experiencing?
In a way we did with the land when we bought the property, we did a cash payment. So you eliminate that interest, and with the vacant building on it, we didn't have utilities to worry about.
Right.
And
or taxes.
We still have the taxes.
Well,
but
the taxes that are going to be assessed versus
because the current taxes are only assessed as what we bought it for.
Right.
So that's fairly minimal. So I would say the taxes is the one thing we did plan on holding it, and. But now that we're into construction with the bank, you could have closed a loan 2 years ago, but we didn't start using that money until now. So the initial 18 months wasn't necessarily a large financial burden. But now at the 12-week delay we're at with the second set of permits, that's where now we've put a lot of money into the construction already. So now that interest is compounding. And then obviously the waiting to finish a model, which you can't do until you've got your permits. So.
Right. And then the city, if I'm just looking at it from a negotiating standpoint, in a simple matter of leverage, is now that you've begun construction and you still need some approvals, do you find that they're utilizing that leverage at all, and trying to impose a little bit more of their will on the project?
No, I don't feel that way. We haven't necessarily gotten any feedback from them that we're doing something wrong or they want something changed.
Right.
And we're in an upward economy, obviously, than what we were the last 5 years, and they're just frankly very busy.
Yeah.
And which is good and bad. It's bad because here we are 3 months later waiting to get above ground, but at the same time, that means there's a lot of other permits out there, a lot of other construction going on, so the demand is obviously there. So it hurts to wait, but had we finished this product a year ago, we probably would have gotten the same pricing.
No.
It would have been a lot
Right.
less. So we are waiting, but on the other hand, too, you got some of the carrying costs, but now our construction costs are just going up across the board, 20 to 30% in certain areas. And luckily, we've had a lot of stuff bid out, but that's also affecting us. And the longer we wait to get that above ground construction done, there's the risk of that going higher too.
Right.
Yeah, that's our major concern when we're doing remodel, construction, development is really just it's a double-edged sword. When the economy is great,
Yep.
seller's market, everything else is going to go up. And I feel like, like you mentioned, the construction costs, it's a big deal. That's a big line item. And then also any city delays, the time is lost. And effectively, if you're paying interest on it, you just can't do much about it. So it's something definitely to consider. It's not just like you're in the deal and everything is good. You're in the deal and then you have this countdown clock to different milestones.
And pauses from time to time.
Right. Where you have to hit and keep your eye on it so the costs don't continue to escalate. And we had some delays on our end too as well with single family construction where we budgeted and thought it was going to be this when in fact like right now we're at a double, but it was just because of city delays or whatever else. And those are the things that you really have to account for and be prepared for, especially going to this project. So you definitely don't want to go all in the beginning. There needs to be some gas left in there.
Absolutely.
For the middle and definitely the end.
That said, it's got to be exciting for you too now that you're not there yet, obviously, but the finish line is becoming more and more visible. I think
it was about 6 weeks ago. So it was real exciting, and people, hey, we're seeing the site develop, and we got a new sign out there, new rendering. So now that we have honed in on our final product, but now I mentioned a lot of the work we've been able to do up to this point, and now for the last few weeks, we literally have nothing left to do on the current permit we're holding. So now, like you said, 6 weeks ago, it's like there's that finish line, and now someone's just ripping me back further down that track in the wrong direction.
Right.
But we still took that first step, and that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and that was the kind of the question that I wanted to end on here a little bit is, a lot of people listening. We spoke a little bit before the podcast even started. How many investors investors in air quotes of people who want to get started but never really do. They give up and just never take that first step. Did you feel like you had all this development stuff figured out before you got into this project, or was there somewhere else that you learned it?
Not at all. No, we had enough tools, Kyle and I, individually on the homes, the vacation properties, and stuff like that. So we knew when we saw that opportunity we could do a condo that we had a lot to learn, and we had to bring in the right people. And that's where our team expanded to the people I mentioned earlier, because without their knowledge and background or their time, that we couldn't do it. And I think that's one of the most important things for people who want to get into real estate and development or property ownership or flipping homes, whatever it is that you got to identify what you're capable of doing and what your knowledge is now. And wherever those holes and gaps are, who do you know and trust that can fill those voids? And you got to pull it together and work as a team.
Right.
That's great advice.
And, on your website, BleuAntDesign.com, right?
With an S, BleuAntDesigns.com.
Yeah, so we will have all the pertinent info within this podcast or YouTube, wherever you're watching and hearing it, so you'll be able to click. But, how can people get a hold? Who should they get a hold of?
Because you can assist with some of this. You guys work with outside investors, right, and do some remodeling, develop that kind of stuff.
And to this point, we haven't had outside private money. We've done everything just between myself and Kyle, and then the money's from BleuAnt Designs. But after this project, we've had a lot of people come to us, hey, I want to get in real estate. I don't want to know about it. I just want my money in it.
I was on your website and I saw a button, let's build something. I was clicking it. I'm like, let's do it.
What do I want?
Yeah.
So
that's great. Yeah.
But there is a lot of people. So we are actually right now in the point where we are putting together a package and some information on how we can bring all that together. We've identified some other really good opportunities in St. Paul that we want to explore, but right now with the Union on Grand, the condo project here we're talking about at Grand Avenue, we're pretty tied up.
I'm sure.
And the only way to make that work is, like I said, we've identified that we're maxed out. We're not going to banks for a whole lot more money right now until this project's done. So the only way, if you want to take advantage of these other opportunities, we got to bring other money in and other people. So we are trying to come up with a way to form that and make that work.
So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about the project that you have on Grand, who can they call? Or you do have an office close to there that they can just stop in. You want to give that info as well?
So on the website, you can find us. You can find our links to our agents, Sarah and Jody at Yoakum Real Estate. And but we're just as happy to talk too. They're the brains of the operation on the buying and selling, and we just kind of try to make sure that we give them all the tools. But we're at 62 South Hamlin, and it's just right on Grand and Hamlin, across from the pizza stop. So we're happy to talk with anyone anytime on the phone.
If they want to walk in or maybe just see some plans, drawings, you can walk through.
We got the drawings there. We got renderings. My wife Sarah, who's doing all the design, she does all her toolkits there of all the products we're finishing. And and if nothing else, you're looking for design aesthetic for your own home in the area too. It's a great opportunity coming. We're happy to work with you there too.
Got it. And then you mentioned the selling agents that you're working with, and then all of the real estate agents that you're listening to. I'm assuming you will be putting in on MLS or offering a buy-side commission, right?
Yes, so we have the first floor is on there now, but again, everyone's pretty eager to get on that top floor first, so we're trying to work with everyone through that. And absolutely, if anyone else has buyers, bring them by.
2.7 or 3? Or 2.5?
It's going to depend on what they bring us for alcoholic beverages to celebrate the closing. If it's a good closing champagne,
right. Either way, what a great opportunity for agents, VSM, or anyone really within the metro area to
know something ahead of time, to be on the pulse, understand the city.
Off-market deal that's that you have an opportunity to. 2.7, 3%. $700K. That's not bad.
It's a good day in the office.
It's a great day, right?
No question. Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Super. Would you please join us at some point again in the future when the project's done?
Absolutely.
And we can talk a little bit more about it and hear how it all went. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks again.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.